Also, remember back in the days where everybody said, okay, if you go to Google and you're going to be typing in a search query, it consumes as much power as making a coffee.
Mm.
So now, we've got at least 3-4x of that for the same request going into your favorite large language model. That's from a power consumption perspective alone. It's convenient to use modern technology, and I guess that's what it's there for. The AI is here to stay. Let's be honest. It's not going away. If anything, it's going to get expanded, and it's going to cover a lot more industries and use cases and day-to-day activities. I mean,
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest Impact of AI Explored. This episode, we have Matt Zaltow. How are you doing, Matt?
hey, how are you doing, James? Hey, Gershon, how are you doing?
Awesome. Let's bring it on.
Excellent. So, Matt, just to get us started, we've been, AI. We're spending billions on AI, but we're not really looking at how much energy we're wasting. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a good question actually, because the industry altogether really just looks at what's in front of you right now, right? So we're really spending billions making AI smarter, but what we don't really see is what's happening behind the scenes. Waste is really invisible from our point of view because nobody sees it, nobody owns it, nobody meters it. And when you've got your enterprises, you've got, especially those, they've got zombie jobs literally running for decades, burning compute and ultimately delivering nothing. Nobody has a meter on that. Nobody knows what's actually going on behind the scenes, but people are also afraid to turn it off. And it just hides inside a big cloud bill, um, and therefore it's not visible. So I guess the best analogy you could probably do with it is standby appliances. Like you would never leave your toaster, provided it actually had a real standby function to it, or a heater or iron board or whatever else on standby in the house, and just wonder why the bill is so high. So like you'd be able to pinpoint that, or you'd be looking for that. In enterprises, it's a little bit more complex, and as a result, there's a lot of waste that's naturally coming with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Matt, you are the global director of strategy and operations at Intelli iPass. For anyone who hasn't come across your platform, what does it do, and what problems are you kind of resolving?
Yeah, so IntelliAppS is an integration platform as a service. We've got global deployment flexibility, meaning that you can install the platform literally anywhere. We've got customers using it in on-premises environments for legacy applications, in public cloud environments, private clouds, of course. It can be containerized. We even have some high security customers that are using it in an air-gapped environment. And that's really our sweet spot, to be honest. Regulated environments and those customers that have the requirement to integrate a lot of different systems with another, but they want to do it exactly where their infrastructure is, rather than relying on a third-party, server infrastructure on top of that as well. And what comes out of it is that because we can connect to legacy systems and cloud systems, really connecting the entire ecosystem through the hybrid um, setup, you'll find that especially when it comes to getting AI readiness into place, the biggest relics, to be honest, that result in a lot of really AI discovery, they are really in these older systems that often can't really be accessed for AI. So we basically just unlock that to make sure that better AI use cases are coming out of it in the future.
Excellent. Yeah. No, we've talked about data from as being the basis of any kind of AI implementation, and having kind of clean data, and actually documenting your processes, those kind of simple steps before you take that leap towards AI. So, we're kind of focusing on sustainability and efficiency. So, if we're talking about digital waste when it comes to kind of enterprise operations, what does that actually mean?
Well, waste in enterprises looks obviously different across the board, right? On the
Yep.
one side, you've got physical waste, of course. On the digital side, again, to the point earlier, it's a little bit, it's much more difficult to measure because ultimately it just gets hidden in a larger bill. And on top of that, the hyperscalers ultimately encourage a dysfunction as well, simply because you get charged per compute. The more compute that you do on Azure, on AWS, etc., plenty of others, the more valuable that customer ultimately becomes. So therefore, there's a strong push to move everything into the cloud and then hopefully forget about it. So, and I mean, we see it with our photo iCloud as well, or Google Cloud, depending on what you use. I mean, back in the Kodak days, how many times did you think about taking a photo, how important it may have been, etc., even in the early days of digital cameras? Now, every iPhone, Android device snaps an unlimited amount of photos. You just upload it, and you may or may not look at it ever again. And that ultimately just signs you up for larger bills, which that's how the world works, yes, but there's also a lot more waste that ultimately comes with it, because let's look at our own iClouds, for example. Do we really need to take 30,000-40,000 images per year, and then retain them all, for the unlikely reason that we're going to be doing a slideshow by the end of the year, where we probably then don't have time doing it and are looking for an AI tool trying to create a 30-second video that we end up publishing on Instagram. So, and this is happening in the this is happening in the enterprise space as well. So, you don't want to delete anything. One, for compliance reasons, totally granted, but also data silos are a huge issue where you've got duplication of data across the entire organization. You've got duplicate records of customers, duplicate records of, I mean, any sort of financial files, for example, various duplications of Excel sheets. The list goes on from here. Where does all of that live? Initially, maybe locally on a computer, but for backup purposes, etc., everything gets uploaded. No one really wants to go through it because you may need it. Massive inefficiencies that are there, and as a result of it, this is unmeasurable from a digital waste perspective.
And AI kind of literally accelerates that. It takes it even further. If we think about, if we think about the kind of models, AI is supposed to make things more efficient, but if we think about the training models, powering data centers, like I know from a particular, we've had issues with data centers here in Ireland because, our grid has been, we put a temporary ban on building data centers because our grid was under stress. So,
I
but
heard about that actually. Yeah.
yeah, and I think what we've had just last week was a new a data center was brought on, and one of the requirements was that it had its own power supply, so it wasn't taking from the grid. And I think that is kind of where I see these, because standard data centers use a certain amount. AI data centers use so much more energy than anything we've seen before. They are absolutely, they are power hungry uh, buildings that require a lot of power. So I suppose the question is, like, how can we make AI part of a sustainability solution? or is it part of the problem, or is it both?
Well, I mean, AI can solve a lot of issues for us. I mean, let's go back to the duplication of data. How much
Mm-hmm.
time do we all have to systematically go through it and find all the duplicates? There's certain tools that help with that, but AI can very much help accelerate that. So as a result, less hard drives are going to be spinning as a result of less duplications of Excel files, for example. And I guess that's a smaller problem among all the other uh, data sources that exist. But nonetheless, to your point, standard server racks, they draw about 5 to 15 kilowatts, depending on what's sort of behind it. AI optimized GPUs, they it's threefold, 40 to 60. And then obviously the cutting edge ones, they're going above that. I've heard figures around like 100 kilowatts and so on per rack. Now per rack, that is now, if anyone wants to picture what a data center looks like, you've got a rack is basically imagine your fridge at home. That's sort of like the size of a rack, a little bit taller, roughly around that sort of size. So now imagine a hallway full of them where you've got thousands of them. So the power consumption that's required for that, even in a standard sense, is significant. So now 3-4x of that for GPU racks is obviously significant. Interestingly, Microsoft, for their Azure program, they recently commissioned an entire nuclear power station in the United States, which is quite remarkable. And I guess it just shows the issue with it. On the one side, the power needs to come from somewhere. It doesn't just come straight out of the uh, yeah, it doesn't come out of the plug, right? You need to generate it, so
Yep.
it needs to come from somewhere. And the distribution of power, I guess this is where political challenges also come on top of that as well. Because on the one side, it's the power consumptions. There's then, for cooling and so on, water might be needed in some cases as well, which has some other ecological impacts if it's not managed carefully. So there's more to it every single time when you're typing "good morning" into ChatGPT. There's quite a bit behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I also have discussions with customers about sustainability, and there's of course the AI costs a lot of energy, but it might also solve. For example, we are working with a company that want to optimize the routes their lorries drive, so they have less CO2 emissions on the road, but they have higher CO2 emissions using AI to optimize the delivery the delivery stuff. So that makes it even more complex, because on the one time you're using more energy, but on the other hand you're saving the environment by optimizing routes.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, Gaussen. So we've got, remember all these electric car conversations. Everyone always said, oh, I've got an electric car, I'm suddenly good for the world. And, because technically there's no emissions coming out every time I press the accelerator. Okay, well, it turns out lithium, cobalt, and so on is mined in sometimes questionable ways. Anyways, more on that maybe on another show. But at the end of the day, nothing is carbon neutral, no matter what we're doing. And to your point there, when it comes to optimizing processes, that's great. And I guess that's where a lot of, let's call it, potential greenwashing might come up as well. Fantastic opportunities for that, because the board or the chief ecological officer might go and say, hey, we've reduced our fleet's carbon emissions by, I don't know, 30%. I'm making that up. And we used AI for it. And that is a fantastic initiative, 100%. But is it really 30%? Because we're now obviously only looking at, how much diesel is being consumed in the moment. And we're not looking at everything else to that. To the points before, very hard to manage. And I think another interesting stat comes from the US, where Deloitte estimates that by 2035, AI data centers, and again, this is a US stats, but nonetheless, the power demand in the US alone could grow more than 30-fold in comparison to 2024. So 30-fold.
Yeah, that's a lot of power times a lot of power.
Yeah. And, great benefits will come from that. Great benefits will come from AI. I'm a big advocate for it. But these topics, I mean, we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No. It very much, we do need to talk about them and be aware of them when we're utilizing AI. All of us, you're sitting in front of your browser, not realizing the power consumption that's happening in the data center where the actual, operation is taking place. So we talked a kind of on a larger scale about renewable energy, cooling systems, but I suppose what you've mentioned there from an operational sense is we can reduce the amount of duplication of files and that kind of thing. And is there any kind of other kind of operational efficiencies we can look at?
Also, remember back in the days where everybody said, okay, if you go to Google and you're going to be typing in a search query, it consumes as much power as making coffee. So now, we've got at least 3-4x of that for the same request going into your favorite large language model. That's from a power consumption perspective alone. It's convenient to use modern technology, and I guess that's what it's there for. AI is here to stay. Let's be honest. It's not going away. If anything, it's going to get expanded, and it's going to cover a lot more industries and use cases and day-to-day activities. I mean, the other day, I didn't have many. Like I'm like a mediocre chef. I'll embarrass myself here a little bit, but I had a couple of little ingredients left in the fridge, and looked at, okay, well, what can I do? I've got some, 5-6 ingredients, and what I really wanted to make was French toast that morning. So obviously some ingredients didn't match. I knew that myself, but I really didn't have flour, particularly in this one case, and but I happen to have cornstarch. Random example, but I'm not good enough of a chef to know out of the box. Okay, well, you can use it, just use it in a different capacity. You can still make French toast. So that's where then I use Perplexity a lot. That's where Perplexity ended up helping me create what turned out to be an amazing recipe. And yes, I could have gone into Google into it. I could have researched it, and then I would have found a traditional recipe, and then I would have said, okay, well, but I don't have these ingredients, and I would have looked for alternatives. So probably by the time you go through this entire research of that for this particular unique use case, your net consumption of energy might actually be the same. Now, again, an assumption, because you're talking multiple Google search queries plus the time involved in comparison to just typing it into it once, maybe putting a follow-up question into it as well. So do I know how much power I've consumed? No idea. But that's just because it's not measured. Nobody tells us. Now, in the end, though, is there a possibility that because it's kind of, in my case, Perplexity has become this one-stop shop for it, is that maybe the power consumption is on par? Maybe there is a net benefit to it. No idea. Would be great if somebody developed that.
Yeah, no, it would be nice to kind of be able to judge how much power we're consuming when it comes to these things. You mentioned earlier that you help organizations get their data AI ready. What do you essentially mean by that? And is there a link between data readiness and reducing waste? I presume deduplication is a big component of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, for the first part, you've got we deal a lot with larger organizations, enterprises, and so on, but increasingly mid-sized organizations as well. Ultimately, especially in the large organizations, you've got a lot of data silos. That basically means that certain information is privy to one particular department only, and it doesn't necessarily travel outside of that. Financial data, for example, sits squarely with finance for right reasons, but customer information, for example, only sits with sales departments, maybe marketing to an extent, but there's no free exchange of data there, at least for the most part. Now, the first part with anything, and this is actually, I mean, leading up to AI readiness, is making sure that you have you got to focus on digital transformation first. And that's really your foundation of it. Because if you don't have a digital transformation strategy altogether, you have various different data silos, and the potential is that if you're laying an AI on top of that, that you get incorrect outputs. I'll explain what I mean. We've recently worked with an insurance company in Singapore, or current engagement. Ultimately, what they've tried is to completely automate their customer service team. So they had multiple different agents on the phone. And when I refer to agents, I don't mean AI agents, like we're talking physical people on the phone.
Yep.
They want to continue doing that and want to have AI ultimately assist the agent and operator with it. Let's use operator, better term, given everyone talks about AI agents. So now the operators had an incoming call, a live transcription of that call was coming in, and depending on whatever insurance questions were asked, immediately the right answers basically appeared on screen. It sounds pretty magical, right? Because anyone has immediate full knowledge of the entire insurance stack and can basically answer every question. Well, unfortunately, that didn't work. Simply because the system got trained on day one, or day zero, as I like to call it. But after that, there wasn't a continuous training on top of that with new insights, objection handling, questions, policy changes, whatever else that might come up with it. And it didn't take very long, especially across multiple different insurance products, for that AI to start giving incorrect advice, and they ended up shelving it because it actually created some problems. So that's one example really where the underlying infrastructure isn't ready for the future. Now, what I mean with this is, and you can make the analogy a little bit with a nervous system. If you're feeling, and I'm holding a glass of water here at the moment, I can feel that it's cold. That's fantastic, and I can feel that in real time. That information is obviously processed by the brain and helps me to coordinate and live my life and do everything else with that. That interconnection between something that's happening in real time, us reacting to certain environmental changes and everything else, that real-time impact is nothing different to different organizational departments ideally talking to another, because there's an information that comes in on one side, no matter how minuscule, that actually has an impact on the other as well. So what we always suggest is start with the plumbing layer first, make sure that your data pipelines are fully done. And then from there, when it comes to AI use cases, further expand this into having small little steps, right? So rather than dealing with the entire insurance questions that might be coming up as well, make sure that everything is up and running first in one particular discipline, and then from there expand into further other ones as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned AI agents. They're hard to avoid at the moment. They're everywhere, and people are talking about them. I have my own views on them.
Yeah, curious.
Yeah, no. So I have a feeling that the majority of companies are not actually ready for AI agents, and I think your what you were talking about with your customer highlighted that, is because you need to kind of have those fundamentals in place. Everyone wants to get to accelerate to here, but they're not prepared to take step A, B, C, D before you can accelerate. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like we've already seen Amazon with its Kiro agent tried. It did actually delete a production system, and they've actually taken a course of action internally that all agent activities have to go via a developer before the code changes are applied. So we are seeing someone on the scale of Amazon making changes to ensure that there is a human in the loop.
So I love that, James, because actually it's very related to a conversation I recently had with a close friend of mine. Happens to be the head of engineering of a very large ticketing company.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, his views, and I echo that, is that probably you would too now. Is that the majority of larger outages that we've seen actually of late are probably the result of AI just doing one or two things, similar to what you just described, being deployed in a production environment and either deleting parts of code or making unexpected changes that prompts the entire world to come to a grinding halt. Which we ended up having a long conversation about governance and how you ultimately put guardrails in place, which, that was interesting chat. Now, in the end, I think, the guardrails obviously need to be in place. But on top of that as well, the AI needs to also have access to clean data, because back to me having a water glass in my hands, I prefer drinking clean water, clean fresh water, in order to think straight.
Yeah.
What AI needs is clean fresh data in order to quote unquote think straight.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, and that's where there's a discrepancy also between what's happening in sandbox environments that are obviously highly shielded. You've got access to all the right information. The outputs are very much predicted for the most part because, a goal is being set for them. Everybody works towards that goal. Now you've got that works in a sandbox environment or UAT, but the moment you put it into the real world, you've got significant challenges with ultimately your model hitting reality. And that's like your Ferrari engine that you put into your golf cart, which works really well in its initial ecosystem, but then the chassis might snap because your data that you have in real life looks nothing like the cleanest data that you have in your controlled environments. That's where a lot of AI hallucination really comes from as well. There's
Yeah.
guardrails you can put in place. It's actually quite easy to do. You just got to set it up correctly from an architectural point of view.
Yeah, and I think you have a fair point there with the guardrails, and if they're in place, it can make a huge difference. But also, like if, as you said, if the data is unclean, you're going to have issues. But it's also not the data. It's like if you give an AI agent a process to do, but you haven't actually, documented that process step by step by step by step, and you've left something out because we go, oh yeah, the person who was like, oh yeah, yeah. That the person knows how to do it, but they don't have that documented, which we're all aware of, having been in the IT space, how many times we've gone into place. It's like, where's documentation? There is none. It's like, it's in that guy's head over there. It's like,
or this is the process, and you ask someone else, no, the process is completely different.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
It's nothing like that.
Yeah, if the process is open to interpretation, then that obviously causes issues as well. So,
I would argue, just to echo that, I would say the most dangerous system that you probably have in your business is really the one that works perfectly, but nobody knows why.
True.
You're right. And I remember I was working at a bank here in Ireland, and we were outsourced to HP, and they came in and there was this server sitting in a corner. And one of the HP team came over and said, "What's that do? Don't touch it."
Yeah, yeah. Anything
It's pretty
with
much
red
running
sticky
the
tape, don't
entire
touch it.
banking system. Don't touch it at all. We've never touched it. So yeah, exactly. That's the thing.
But now add AI on top of that. This server, don't touch it, will have like that. That's the dusty attic that dusty attic nobody goes into, and that's got all the Picassos in the world sitting in there, but nobody knows about them, right? So there's so many opportunities now where AI can come on top of this as well, analyze what's actually there. Ideally, don't delete it in the process, but then see what is there, what additional business logic and insights can come out of that. And now back to sustainability, an old server that's sitting in the corner running for multiple decades. Um, Maybe that data can be consolidated, outsourced somewhere else, and then may the server rest in peace.
Yeah, yeah, no. I think you're right. You can bring efficiencies into a business by utilizing AI and looking at your legacy systems and seeing if there's ways that you can take the data, which is the most important component. You don't really care about the application. You only want the data, and then streamline those systems so that you're not running multiple legacy systems. So yeah, no, I agree there on the possibilities there. But as I said, I think as we've we've harped on pretty much every episode about data and processes when it comes to AI. And it's the boring bits, but it's the essential bits. Please. So that's why we
Yeah.
continue to talk about it, because we see it day after day. Gershon talks to me about it all because he's more on, doing the AI project side, whereas I just look anecdotally about what's going on in the world. But I do see it from other cases. So yeah, it's very much data and processes are essential for any kind of AI implementation. All right. So we've talked about agents, we've talked about what goes wrong and the potential. We've seen all of the kind of things. So it's a good look back more on the sustainability. So we're seeing that ESG reporting is becoming more and more mandatory. It's becoming part of like companies when they send out their documents to shareholders, they have an ESG you can call it whatever you want if you want. If they're quantifying it, or if it's greenwashing, or what it is. But I don't think IT teams are quite ready to quantify the environmental impact of their digital operations. It still seems like a blind spot, and we've pretty much said that it is, considering that we don't really know how much power we're consuming where we're into having talking to an AI. So, what do you agree? Do you think it is a blind spot?
Look, I think it's a genuine blind spot. IT teams usually don't really know what their workflows actually consume. And I guess this goes back to the metering earlier as well. If it's hard to report on anything that you cannot measure in the end. Now, I don't want to say that anything on the ESG initiatives are greenwashing. Obviously, some opportunities can come up, but in the end, you know, often people genuinely care, and I think that's a good thing. Now, again, it's you got to start with the measuring. If you can't really get the data, then what more can you really do, right? So I think more needs to be done there. There are a lot of predictions that are obviously coming with that. You can look at the total use of, but breaking it down for each particular process is often a little difficult here. So I feel for the most part it gets underreported.
Yeah, I do too. So, if you could change one thing about how enterprises approach sustainability of their digital operations, what would it be?
That's a good question. I mean, visibility and control is really one of the big ones, right? So you know what? Besides that, accountability really comes in as well, because now from an integration point of view as well, integration debt is also never urgent until a strategy such as an AI strategy or something else, or maybe an ESG audit, really forces someone to really have a look at it. So no one is really taking that ownership and responsibility until, yeah, ultimately somebody comes with a big stick, waves it, and now you've got initiatives in place. It's funny how it works. But so I think if there's more ownership altogether beyond what's just happening in the technical world, I think that'll be good. I do feel that um, make your CFO or CIO in charge of this. I think the CFOs would probably be good because if they would own the number of that, the CFOs love their numbers. I think if the CFOs would own the number with that, the architecture would probably change pretty quickly when it comes to this. But yeah, it's overall sustainability from my perspective really starts with data governance, and again, that governance starts with accountability.
Yeah, so make someone responsible for your ESG reporting. Make
One
someone,
one team, one person. Yeah.
yeah,
So in larger organizations, this often happens also because you need to satisfy what shareholders want. In smaller mid-sized organizations, not as much. And depending on where you look globally, I mean, I spend a lot of time in Asia, and I've got a lot of a global perspective on it. There's in different countries you deal with this topic completely different. So I'm German originally, and Germany obviously feels that with a lot of initiatives that are right in nature, but overall that they can change the world with it. It turns out in reality, even if Germany were to produce no additional carbon whatsoever anymore, it would only be an absolute percentile of what's happening on a global scale. So yes, change needs to start at grassroots level, but at the end of the day, everyone, and I mean this is a global initiative that needs to take place, needs to feel the urge to doing something, because otherwise you've got some nice reports, which is good, but you don't actually have measurable impact that future generations can ultimately benefit from.
yeah. It's just a number on a report, probably a printed report.
Potentially a printed report. uh, yes, yeah, in
Um,
a plastic coating, just to make
oh,
sure it's
exactly.
good.
Yeah,
Laminated
the plastic
and
folder. Yeah,
laminated.
yeah.
Yeah.
Biodegradable plastic coating. Yeah.
um, wh- when it comes to AI and sustainability, Matt, where do you see the biggest gap still?
Efficiencies.
Mm,
I think because I mean we now heard the numbers earlier with 30x more power consumption and so on. I mean this is 30x more consumption of what we have today. Why can't we be 30% more productive with the current power that we have today? So I think that's probably one of the biggest parts. The and I think that's really where integration can help with it, at least from a groundwork perspective as well, because AI processes are also going to be far more efficient when they've got easy, ready to consume access to the data, rather than looking in 6 different sources trying to correlate the details on its own, potentially having sub agents trying to correct the work that's there, and so on. So architectural challenge, of course, but nonetheless, if your nervous system works, back to your body analogy, if everything is in perfect harmony and sync, then anything can really come and you can react to it very quickly. So I do think that we can draw analogies between, I think, the brain's speed and our own consumption of energy as a, from a body perspective. Because if we are looking after ourselves, well, drink a lot of water, you eat healthy, exercise, everything else to that, you're going to be you're going to be sharper and more on edge than somebody who does the opposite. So, and with systems, it can be very, very similar to that. So that if you allow, especially AI, to have access to that information, if data transformation is happening in the moment where it actually needs to take place. So what often happens is you've got source and target systems that need to connect with another. Different different systems require different levels of data. First of all, one might be different formattings, but in addition to that, you might have different source systems, and that information needs to be aggregated into a target system. So we do this pretty often where you've got multiple different issues that are coming in on the one side. They need to be enriched, coming together, and then they are presented in a target system. So rather than the AI connecting to all these different source systems as well, it'll be easier to make it much more accessible to the target system where the perfect information lies already. And that's really where it comes to methods like source of truth, making sure you've got great sources of truth that you, but also AI can rely on. And then that'll cover like 80% of your AI operations for the most part, if it's set up correctly. And what you can then use is smaller agents that might be running on local servers as well. There's plenty of fantastic solutions already, and they're only going to become better. That can then ultimately go out and be on an excursion for new efficiencies, for example. And that's energy well spent from my perspective, because that can then result in processes that are going to be improving over time. And as a result, not just the ESG score improves happily and healthily, but Jolly Polar Bear also feels pretty good.
And we also like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. Matt, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. We've really appreciated, and we will see everyone on the next episode. If you're listening to this, don't forget we have a YouTube channel as well, or if you're watching this, we're on all major audio platforms. So we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.
And like and subscribe. That's the buzzword bingo we need to fix. But like and
Bell
subscribe,
icon up
everyone.
there.
And
Bing.